All right, let's do this. JB, already here. Love it. That's soccer practice on the sidelines. That's dedication to the nation right there. All right. I'm waiting on questions. Yep. You guys give me questions. That's how it works. I don't know everyone that's going to be in here. We're probably going to have some visitors from other schools potentially, as it always seems to happen on these cram sessions. So you guys fire questions away. That's how this is going to work. Let's do it to it, man. I'm taking any questions people have. You got to type your questions in the chat. I don't know how James got in. I don't know how you got in before. But it's the DBQ going to be on. Yeah, I love this guy, Dominic Radis. No idea who that is. Great. Oh, Latch, what's up? No idea what the DBQ is going to be on, but I do know that the key to the DBQ is knowing the rubric. So a quick rubric recap. 1 point context, 1 point thesis. Pretty straightforward. That's your intro. All right. The key that I've been stressing to my students about dominating the DBQ is being able to navigate the doc analysis portion. So with the doc analysis, the big key that you guys want to focus on, the big key is making sure that you, when you're doing your evidence, always remember that every document that you put into your paper, every document needs to explain and support your thesis. So let's take a classic DBQ on the progressive era. This is one of my students practiced last month. So the question was about whether or not the progressive era changed America. If your argument's going to be that the progressive era changed America, then every document that you choose must relate back to how that document reflects the change in the progressive era. The big mistake a lot of students make is that they don't do the following steps on the doc analysis. 1, you got to summarize the document. Literally tell us what the document is saying, whether it's a picture, a letter, a graph. Tell us exactly what you see. 1 sentence. 2nd, you have to bring the SAP in. And for those of you that might say HIP or HIPPO, whatever, SAP, we call it in our class. Situation, audience, purpose, point of view. You need to identify and explain what that is. But the key is you must explain how the document relates back to your argument. So if I'm looking at a bolus lacrosse, evaluate the extent to which Alex Latchford has improved bolus lacrosse. And you're looking at a graph of Alex Latchford's statistics. And it shows that when he's on the field, the team has a higher plus-minus ratio. Okay, that document, you need to say, the document showing Alex Latchford's plus-minus reveals that Latchford has a plus, whatever, 18 for the season. The purpose of the document is to show that Latchford has had an immediate impact on the bolus lacrosse team. The document supports the argument that Latchford has improved bolus lacrosse because when he's on the field, the statistics show that Alex Latchford and the Bolus Bulldogs play better. Boom. 3 sentences. Get out. That's all you need. 3 sentences. That's the key. If you want to pick up those evidence points, which there are 2 evidence points, 1 for getting 3 docs, 2 for getting 6 docs, that's how you have to do it. It's that simple. 3 sentences. The other points, of course, you got to have a separate paragraph for outside knowledge. Separate paragraph. So lead into this separate paragraph with, although there is no document about Braden Ferguson's role as keeper, Ferguson has helped lacrosse because he's a beast in the net, blah, blah, blah. Lead into that with that statement. That should be a separate paragraph. And then the final paragraph is you have to, or at some point in your essay, you have to acknowledge the 3C skill. So you have to do both continuity and change over time, or both cause and effect, or both similarity differences. That's the key. There's your 7 points on the DBQ. The best way to respond to the SAQ is to know the content material. And the best way to study for that is if you look over the scoring guidelines on recent SAQs. I think that's a great strategy. It's late. I know we're after 9 o'clock the day before the exam, but you can do a quick whip around and you can take a look at the past essays. And on the scoring guidelines, it gives you explanations. With the SAQ, you simply have to identify and explain. That's the key. Identify and explain. So when they say, briefly explain one reason why Manifest Destiny contributed to the Civil War, you got to give an example. So you could just say Manifest Destiny led to the Civil War because, enter that keyword because due to the push to move west, the Americans gained more territory via the Mexican-American War. In this conflict, the United States acquired lands from Mexico, and that begged the question, would slavery extend into the territories, thus promoting sectionalism as a conflict? Boom. There you go. So I think each SAQ section, A, B, C, should be 3 sentences at most. Identify, give the reason, give the answer, and then give the reason why. For the LAQ, do we need 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph? No, you only need 2 pieces of evidence to support your essay. So if the question is, evaluate the extent to which the French and Indian War was a turning point in American history, that's a great prompt. I would love that if I were you. Then you have your context, give background. The war started as a result of Britain and the French jockeying for position. Something had to give. Both sides were at each other's throats. Eventually, the colonists got dragged into the war. The war is a turning point because ultimately it changed the dynamic between the colonists and the British. So there you go. Right now you have to support that claim that the war changed the dynamic between the colonists and the British. And when you're doing that, you need to find 2 specific examples. So 1, you could write a whole paragraph identifying salutary neglect and the end of that relationship as a key reason why the relationship changed. And then you have to explain why or how. Remember, we're talking about how and why. For every essay, SAQ, LEQ, DBQ, always make sure you're answering the questions how and why. For your second reason, maybe you talk about how the British began to enforce stricter penalties against colonists moving west. Right? They had the Proclamation Line of 1763. So in that Proclamation Line, right, it restricted westward expansion, and that was a limitation on the freedoms of the colonists. And so when you look at those factors, as long as you identify what the reason is and then explain how or why it supports your thesis, you're all good. With the LEQ, the big difference is, right, you have the 3C section. So that's, again, the continuity and change, the similarity and differences, or the cause and effects. But then what we talk about in our class all the time is the how and the why, or the PSF. Your last paragraph should show that you can relate the topic that you're writing about. So if it's the French and Indian War being a turning point, find another major turning point or find another event in U.S. history that's similar to the French and Indian War. That's how you can pick up the complexity point. That's how you can pick up the complexity point. So these are all good writing tips. I think, the writing portion is 60% of the exam. The SAQs are 20%. The LEQ is 15 and the DBQ is 25. So 60% of the exam is on your ability to conquer the writing. I think that, knowing what the rubric's asking doesn't change whether you know the material, but also remember, and that'll get to be Rich II's point. Also remember, on the SAQ, you have options. You get to choose one of the 4 options. So the first 2 you have to answer, and then options 3 and 4 you can choose. On the LEQ, they give you 3 questions. Pick the one that you feel most comfortable. The DBQ, you don't get a choice. Is it important to know about the differences of early colonies? Well, think about from the sense that the early colony stuff, they always ask the same questions. 1, they ask about their economies, the difference in their economies. Okay, so for example, New England was primarily a small farming community of settlers. You had fishing, you had whaling, you had hunting, logging. Timber was a big resource in New England. The New England was smaller farms, though. It didn't have the massive plantation economies that the middle and southern colonies and Chesapeake colonies did. Okay, so that changes the dynamic, right? That's going to lead to less slaves in New England. But New England did have a lot of indentured servants. The middle colonies was a lot of tenant farming. People rented the land. So therefore, you had a lot of settlers coming in that weren't super wealthy, people from all over Europe. And that led to a very diverse community of peoples. You get Germans, you get Irish, you get British, you get some Dutch in there. So ultimately, the middle colonies economy was driven though by agriculture. In fact, all the colonies were driven by agriculture. And then, of course, the Chesapeake and the southern colonies were plantation-based economies. That is important. You need to know the difference in economies. The other thing you need to know about the early colonies pre, Revolutionary War, you should definitely know about their geography, the impact that geography had. Super important, because the geography determined what they could grow, what the climate was. The relations with Native Americans differed based on the relationship to geography. So those are crucial topics with the early colonies. But do you need to memorize all 13? I mean, you should know that by now, but geez, you do need to sort of be able to relate their geography and their economy. So those are the patterns that I've seen on a lot of the questions. The other things that they could possibly bring up would be just like migration patterns. We know that fewer settlers went to the southern Chesapeake regions because there were less job opportunities. The northern colonies, the middle colonies were more industrialized, more diverse. So that made it more attractive to European settlers. And of course, the big demographic thing in the southern and middle Chesapeake was the slavery by the late 1600s. If you have no idea what an multiple choice question is, the best way to attack it, just skip it, come back to it, and then, you can always get down to two choices. And there's always two choices that look true. Okay, so get to 50-50. Like I'm picking the Kentucky Derby this weekend. So, and the Kentucky Oaks. I want as best odds as I can get. And in a 20-horse field, those are not great odds. Those are not great odds. 1 in 20 chance. But on the multiple choice, it's a 1 in 4 chance. So, Hammer, my point and my recommendation to you would be that get to two choices as best as possible, and then realize that they always have two choices in there, and both look accurate. But pick the one that best relates to the question. So, if the question is on the Gilded Age, right? And so the Gilded Age, we talked about one of the dominant themes being the economy, laissez-faire, big business, monopolies, tycoons, captains of industry, railroads, major industries growing. All right. If that's one of the choices, and then the other choice has to do with, immigration. Like the Gilded Age is mostly about the economy. Pick the choice that best relates to the question and the topic. Pick the choice that best relates to the question and the topic. Is there anything past Ronald Reagan you think is important to know? Yes. So our class, we certainly got cut a little short, but here's the good news. Okay. On the DBQ is from 1754 to 1980, which means Reagan is not going to be on a DBQ. I repeat, Reagan would not be a DBQ because that's after 1980. Reagan didn't come into office until 1981. You also mean that the early colonies, the European arrival, not in the DBQ. Where could you see questions on Reagan? MCQ, SAQ, and LEQ. But here's the thing. The LEQ is broken down into 3 sections, as we've discussed. You have early history, middle history, modern history. If you get a question on the LEQ that you don't know, why would you answer that? That's foolish. So just move on. Topics that could come up from after Reagan. Conservatism, we know that's going to be a big deal, and the economy, right? That's always going to be on there, conservatism and the sort of Reaganomics. The other topics that could come on there are the internet, right? The emergence of the internet. I've seen multiple choice questions and problem sets about the impact the internet had. I've seen questions about the first Iraq War, which was the first war of the United States, full-scale war the United States engaged in the early 1990s, since really Vietnam, although we were certainly involved in conflicts and troops were sent into the Caribbean under Reagan. But there's sometimes questions about that. Tax cuts. Okay, the conservative movement would continue. And this is something we talked about the other day with Reagan, tax cuts. Under the first George Bush, he famously, during a speech, talked about no new taxes. And yet the government ended up adding more taxes in the 1990s. And that was a trend that continued under Clinton. With Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, not off the table or under the table. Ha, if you get that joke, you know what I'm talking about. So Clinton era, you get the internet, you get Lewinsky scandal, you get America involved in foreign conflicts like in the Balkans region. And then there could be a 9/11 question that sneaks in there. The only thing that I didn't really go into, and I kind of feel like crummy about this is modern day immigration trends. Look, if you go back to the arrival of the Europeans, you're going to get a lot of questions about um, uh, immigration, right? It all started with Europeans coming over. Um, you know, when you look at the evolution of immigration, right, the big wave comes in the beginning with the Puritans and certain Europeans, but then major wave of immigrants comes in the mid 1800s for the Civil War. Irish do the potato famine, Germans, especially English, keep coming over, Scottish. And then in the late 1800s, you start getting Italians, Eastern Europeans, Jewish peoples, especially from Russia, Slavic peoples. 1900s, right? Big immigration. America starts to close down immigration. Like I talk about in the podcast, the Fireside Chat podcast, we get tougher on immigration in the 1920s after World War I because of the Red Scare. So I got to hydrate here. Voice is getting low. Big modern day immigration boom. Latin Americans and Asian Americans. Huge change over time. More and more Latin Americans start emigrating to the United States. And then with the Chinese Exclusion Act being lifted in 1940 during World War II, lots of Chinese come, especially because Mao Zedong was a complete, absolute, ruthless dictator who slaughtered and, crushed his own people to death. So a lot of Chinese escaped. And then also you get big South Asians. So people from India, Pakistan, much in part due to their conflicts. So arrival of Asian migration, 1960s, 70s, 80s. That's an important theme to Bennett Richmond's question. But a lot of the modern stuff tends to deal with the economy. So tax cuts, Reaganomics, difference in approaches, right? With Democrats, we've kind of cemented this idea that since the early 1900s and the New Deal, a lot of Democrats primarily promoted the idea of heavy government spending with welfare programs, whereas conservatives kind of rejected those notions. Okay. Keep the questions coming, guys. We're only on here till about 10:15 or so. I know it's late and a lot of you want to get a good night's rest, but I'm doing my best to give you guys some support. So if there's any topics that throw you off or any questions, it's hard for me just to like randomly choose topics. So I want to know what the people have to say. Not as many people coming in here, guys. I was a little surprised. Not a lot of folks chiming in. I don't know. Maybe I scare people away here with the mustache. It's hard to know. Yeah, the U.S. got out of depression, Zach, primarily due to the boom of World War II. A major theme about World War II that you should all be very, very aware of is how mobilization, the United States mobilized for war in an unprecedented rate. We watched that great video for a homework assignment in our class about mobilization, right? Millions of people going into the factories and working, just an incredible an incredible at an incredible rate, unlike anything else in American history. So because the war effort was so demanding on the economy that people just had to go back to work, and a lot of industries were nationalized by the federal government. So the federal government took over a lot of industries, and as a result, people had to go back to work. Like we just that was required. Like you could get drafted into doing factory work if you couldn't serve in the military. So just put a lot of people back to work, and then after the war, right, the military industrial complex was raging. So the economy really up until the 1970s, right, under Carter, we talked about the stagflation of the 1970s, but really from the 40s, 50s, 60s, the space race, the Cold War, the technology boom, or that was funneling lots of economic growth, fueling. Sorry, not funneling. That was fueling a lot of economic growth. Can we run through progressive era and Reconstruction? Let's go back to Reconstruction. So post Civil War, we have unbelievable change over time, and the change over time is the basically the agency that the African Americans, Black Americans get from the federal government. So the war ends, and Lincoln had begun to propose a 13th Amendment, which was to abolish slavery. He dies before that could actually get passed and written into the Constitution. So rip Lincoln, but welcome 13th Amendment. Major themes: the radical Republicans. Republicans were in control of the government, and that was because the majority of the Southerners were Democratic. So the South was at the time, the Democratic Party was the party of the South. The Republicans wanted to make the Southern Renaissance, right? The rebirth of the South as painful as possible. So all types of restrictions were put on Southerners for getting back into the Union. And the Northern Republicans ensured that the Southern states would have to accept amendments to the Constitution and federal laws in order to gain membership back into the Union. It was a pretty smart strategy by the Radical Republicans. So the Radical Republicans also began to effectively pass legislation that favored the growth of civil rights, the chief one being the Freedmen's Bureau. And almost instantly, the Freedmen's Bureau brings this idea of welfare to Black Americans in the South. So new schools, new jobs, infrastructure being built. The North goes all in. But this immediately establishes a conflict with Southern state governments and Southern peoples. Carpetbaggers, scalawags were terms used to describe pro-Reconstruction people in the South. But the Freedmen's Bureau was super effective. The literacy rate of Black former slaves skyrockets. And so we have this incredible growth in civil rights efforts during Reconstruction. The cornerstones of Reconstruction are the three amendments. The 13th, the abolishment of slavery. The 14th, which established a myriad of things, but primarily citizenship. So if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. Doesn't matter if you were a tourist. Like, let's say your parents were visiting the United States and your mom had a surprise pregnancy. If you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen. It also established equal protection clause, which means that everybody is equally protected under the law. That paved the way for so many great civil rights acts in the future. Like when we get to the 1960s with the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then you also get in the Reconstruction era, enforcement acts. The federal government was strict and trying to protect the lives and safeguard the lives of many Black Americans. You get the Reconstruction Acts where they divided the South into military districts. So the Radical Republicans are doing all sorts of things to effectively bring the South back under control. Now, the South rejects all this, of course. They fight back against it. And that's where we get the rise of groups like the KKK. That's where the Democrats begin to win seats in Congress. And the counterbalance to that for the North was eventually the North decides that they want to give Black males the right to vote. And so the 15th Amendment was the last of the Reconstruction Amendments. And the 15th Amendment turns out to be somewhat controversial amongst white women. The women's rights movement considered this a huge setback to their cause because women were not given the right to vote before Black males. And so white women were not given the right to vote. So this is seen as a major setback to the women's rights movement. But ultimately, Reconstruction does all these wonderful achievements. But at the same time, it does give rise to the Southern Redeemers. So the Redeemers were Southern Democrats who wanted to take back control of the governments in the South and wanted to ultimately restore the South's control over, or the Democrats' control over the South. Now, with the 15th Amendment, we do get the first black males elected to United States Congress. Joseph Rainey and Hiram Revels were the first two Southern black Southern males that are elected to public office. But over time, paramilitary groups, um, paramilitary groups like the White League, the KKK, they begin a just absolute reign of terror. And in this reign of terror, these groups completely begin to obliterate uh, the efforts that the radical Republicans were trying to make. And as a result of that, we start to see violence erupt. There are arguments that I've read about um, Reconstruction era that some historians would argue that Reconstruction was more violent than any other period in American history when we were not at war. There were race riots. There was all sorts of attacks. You have the Memphis race riots in 1866, shortly after the war ended. You got the Colfax massacre in Louisiana, which was an attempt to block blacks from voting. Just sheer carnage, and lynching becomes commonplace. So if you're writing an essay about Reconstruction, evaluate the extent to which Reconstruction had a positive effect. That's a legitimately compelling question. You could argue both sides. And that's one thing to remember about the essays, guys, is that no matter what the topic is, the question is always going to have two sides. It's always going to have two sides. They're not looking for you to effectively answer a specific position. They want to see how you operate within that boundary of, okay, there's two sides. Which one are you jumping on? If anyone else has any other questions on Reconstruction, go for it. I think that, I'm sure I'm leaving out some aspects, but I want to keep covering different topics. But I hope for Alex Latchford that um, is a good comprehensive point about Reconstruction. Now, the Progressive era comes about. Oh, so Reconstruction, how does it end? Let's just briefly talk about that. So by the 1870s, the radical Republicans were losing momentum. The support for Reconstruction was dissipating. It was costing a lot of money, and a lot of Northerners were like, all right, we're moving on to things like Manifest Destiny, westward expansion, railroads. So the spirit of Reconstruction starts to fade away. In doing so, the South begins to win elections back, and the Democrats begin to win elections back in the South. Now, 1876 is considered to be one of the last years of Reconstruction because ultimately, in 1876, there's a presidential election. And in this presidential election, there was a tie. And Zach Hammerschmidt is always on top of this. When there's no winner or there's a tie, I apologize. It wasn't a tie. There was no majority in Electoral College vote between Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, and Samuel Tilden. So, if there is no yeah, it goes to the House. If there's no majority, it goes to the House. But they still couldn't elect the president. There was no agreement. So the deal was that the Republicans made a deal with the South, the Democrats. They said, okay, if the Southern Democrats gave the White House to the Republicans, then the Republicans would pull out of the South. So no more military districts, no more Reconstruction. That was it. This is known as the corrupt bargain of 1877. Hayes would win the election, in the only election in American history that was not decided by, it wasn't decided by the House. It was ultimately decided by a committee of members of the House and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was actually on that committee. It's wild. What a story that was. And that's the end of Reconstruction. That officially ended Reconstruction because then the North pulled out and the Democrats were able to take back control. Now, Hammer, I remember you asking this in class, and I went back and I think I just got lost, sidetracked. Tilden Elementary in Moco is named after presidential candidate Samuel Tilden. It was named after him. I looked that up. Yep. Oh, Kennedy, I can't. I have no idea. No idea. Um, no idea. I have no idea. I you ask me that, Kennedy Crawford, is like me being like, yeah, I know exactly who's going to win the Kentucky Derby. I have no clue, and I don't like to guess because it's just not. It's not like I don't want to steer you wrong. I got to go back to Kennedy's question though, real quick. So something to consider. Look, the DBQ could be up to 1980. That's 80 years. All right, I suck at math. Let me do the math here. So from 1754, so from 1980, sorry, 1900, 1899 minus 1754. That's 145 years. 145 years. So 145 years is a lot more than 80 years. Will the DBQ come from the 20th century? I don't know. Less um there's less time for it to cover. So look at it like that. Is my math? I know I suck at math. I only got a 560 on the SATs. I know people that got a lot higher score than me, like 760s and 760s and such. Oh, yeah, Don Boyajian for sure. He's going to be haunting our AP scores. Our egg will not be able to stop thinking about Don Boyajian. Latch, is there a podcast? I don't know of any podcasts. I mean, I've got on my YouTube channel. Seriously, if you go back, and I'm not trying to shamelessly promote my YouTube channel. If you go back to my YouTube channel, I've got like I've got like 5-6 years worth of YouTube videos. I don't know. Go ahead and find one on a topic you're not um, that knowledgeable about. I don't know of any podcasts, but oh, Samantha Kotak. This is a favorite topic. I know there's a lot of people out there that when they're tired at night, they just want to listen to Henry Clay's American System and points about that because it was so important. Henry Clay's American System is a really critical thing because it's it actually is a cool tie. I know there's a lot of people out there who are big fans of Hamilton, the 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 play. Oh, Latch. Sorry, you caught my attention with that's too funny. Um, Hamilton economic plan was one of the first attempts by the United States to secure the bag and make the United States a major economic player in the world. But Clay's American System was post War of 1812. So Hamilton, after the war, creates an economic plan that dealt with the introduction of high tariffs. He wanted to consolidate, meaning he wanted to put all of America's debt together, and in doing so, that strengthened America's ability to establish credit overseas with different countries. Don't ask me how. I'm not really going to go into the economics of all that. Um, but the other aspect of Hamilton's economic plan was industrialization. He pushed for industrialization. Why am I talking about Hamilton? Well, it's not just because there's people out there watching who are big fans and I'm trying to seem cool. It's actually because the fact that Hamilton's plan was continued, so continuity by Henry Clay, about where America was sat during the era of good feelings. So the key cornerstones of Henry Clay's American plan: one, major tariffs, high tariffs. And high tariffs are typically kickstarters for the development of internal economic growth. If you are taxing heavily foreign goods, then that discourages countries from trying to trade with you. Thus, it makes an impetus for the government to promote its own industries. So, one, Clay, high tariff. All right, that's important. Two, internal improvement. So, Clay was a promoter of roads and canals. Remember, I'll never forget when we did the where would you draw or where would you build the most iconic canal? And our egg drew it like across the United States, the longest canal in world history. The Erie Canal was a major transportation artery, and Clay pushed for the government to fund canal and road projects. So keep that in mind. Nice little continuity with the Eisenhower interstate system. Hammer, you're welcome. I got 2 flavors of Pop-Tarts ready to go tomorrow. I got like 24. So I'll be in the room around like 7:30 probably. 7:30. I'm not going to get any drinks though. So if you want, I don't know what people like. I didn't want to have to deal with that. So just got some Pop-Tarts, some pregame Pop-Tarts. We'll be ready to rock and roll. I love it. Drive for 5, baby. And then the other part of the American system was, what was the other part? Oh my God. It was roads, canals, high tariffs. Oh, like manufacturing. It favored manufacturing. So Clay wanted to promote manufacturing. North Hall 102. All right, Bennett. Evaluate the extent to which the Milwaukee Brewers can win the NL Central this year. There's your random prompt. All right. Oh, here's an apush one though, because we all know the Milwaukee Brewers have become a very popular storyline, especially with Holden Cobb, who's now betting his life savings every night on the Milwaukee Brewers due to my inside information I bring to the classroom. Okay, here's a good one. Evaluate the extent to which migration patterns shaped the development of the United States in the 19th century. Cobb, I don't know what. Maybe you got to give a pep talk, Cobb. You got to get on your boy Rowdy. They just dropped 3 in a row, man. No, more than 3 in a row to the freaking Rockies too. God. So how about that one, B. Rich? Evaluate the extent to which immigration patterns shaped the development of America in the 19th century. Okay. All right, what were some of the reactions to Clay's system? I know the South opposed it. Yeah, that is a big one, KC. That's a really big one. The South felt that Clay's American system exacerbated some of the sectional differences. So if you're building a narrative, like if you get a question on sectionalism, Clay's American system further created a divide between North and South because the system was viewed as being favorable to the North. Oh, Grich. Love the AP Comp Gov cameo. 15th president is the only bachelor in American history. Big Jimmy Buchanan, baby. Jimmy Buck. The only bachelor in American history as president. James Buchanan. All right, this is good. Keep the questions coming. We got about 30 minutes left. Then I got to get on a Zoom call with my father and talk about the horse racing. Can you tell me how you would respond to that prompt? You literally said you were going to make one up in your head. What, I got to do the work for you now? Come on. I'm sitting here. I'm trying to get into details about, the Roaring 20s. I don't know. Okay, migration patterns. Immigrants started to come to the United States. You have to think about it. When did immigrants really hit the United States hard? Okay, this is a good topic. So let's review immigration. Big immigration boom. Cobb, I'm not ready to do that, man. I've got like 3 horses that I'm kind of sitting on, and I'm not ready to make a pick. I'm not ready to make a pick yet. I'm not ready to make a pick yet. The thing is, like, I'm in a contest with like all the other races Friday and Saturday, so it's not like I'm just picking the Derby. But I will say in the Oaks, I'll give you my Oaks pick. In the Oaks, which is the female race tomorrow, I like this horse, South Lawn in the Kentucky Oaks. That goes off tomorrow. Yeah, you're funny, James. I didn't choose, by the way. I lied to you. So hope you bought them and knowing that they were not that cool in the end. All right, so immigration, big immigration boom. Europeans arrival, that's huge. Okay, number 1. Secondly, Puritans, the Puritan migration to New England. All right, that's a huge one. Uh, Other immigration would continue during the American Revolution. Slaves, right? That's forced migration, but still counts. African slaves, hundreds of thousands against their will. Disgusting, just disgraceful part of our history. Oh, Latch, that's enticing, but I will not be in town this Sunday. I'll be elsewhere. I'll be out of town. But we got to tee it up, man. We got to tee it up so I can smoke my 3-wood 280 yards past you guys. Okay, back to immigration. So once we get past the Revolutionary War, major immigration early 1800s, much in part due to the Industrial Revolution. Jobs drives immigration. Primary groups: English, Irish, Germans. 1820s, 30s, 40s, huge boom of immigration. With that, though, comes the response that changes America, right? Nativism movement, Know Nothing Party, xenophobia, right? Fear of immigrants, big time. Civil War, immigration kind of slows down, right? America's focusing on the Civil War, but after the war, the growth of the West. Remember, the Scandinavians come over, the Chinese come over to build the railroads, lots of immigration. But Chinese Exclusion Act, another just despicable, disgusting moment in American history, can't ignore. Then you get lots and lots and lots of Europeans arriving. So that's a big immigration pattern of the 1800s. And then towards the end of the 1800s, you get the big boom from Eastern Europe: Jewish, Italian, Russian, Slavic, Polish. Why are they coming? Jobs, industry. America's booming. So that's, you could say, like, I mean, immigrants, the migration patterns change the demographics, right? Growth of cities. Immigrants typically don't move to farms. Growth of cities, tension, political tension, right? Because immigrants join different political parties, especially the Democratic Party. Think back to what we learned about with Boss Tweed, Tammany Hall, the political machines. A lot of them try to coerce immigrants to join their political machines. Immigrants also impact the workforce, right? Their labor. Really great topic. Difference between Know Nothing and Whigs. Well, the Whigs were like the precursor to the Republican Party. Remember, the Jacksonian Democrats, Jackson blew everything up. The arrival of Jackson into American politics changes politics forever, because prior to Jackson, you had the Dem Reps, the Democratic Republicans. And then the corrupt bargain happens of 1824. Jackson forms his own political party. In 1828, he wins the White House. All right, so then it comes the age of Jackson. And that's a whole other topic, right? You get more universal male suffrage. Jackson was big on voting rights increasing, but for white males, not for everybody else. Jackson was also big on strengthening the power of the presidency, sometimes at the cost of the Constitution, and sometimes in direct conflict with other branches like the Supreme Court and Congress. Jackson was also big on manifest destiny. That's why he wanted to get rid of the natives. But in response to Jackson, think about it like this: if you're not with Jackson, then you're against him. So the former Dem Reps that were in the same party as Jackson's arrival completely blows up the American political system. I mean, it's one of the only times in U.S. history you can say one person completely obliterated the American political system. And so Jackson, right, has this tremendous effect in the sense that now, if you're like Henry Clay or Daniel Webster, and you're not with Jackson, then you're against him. And that's when the Whig Party formed. And the Whigs became prominent in the 1830s, 40s, and then they kind of started to fade in the 1850s. But for 2 decades, the Whigs got after it. Your first Whig president ever, a little DPK here, William Henry Harrison, also the shortest tenured American president. He lasted not very long, only a month in office. Other Whig presidents, Zachary Taylor would be Whig president in 1848. That is it, though, because 1840s you had Harrison was 1840, Polk was Democrat 1844, Zachary Taylor 1848. I guess Millard Fillmore, but he took over for Taylor when he died. 42 was Pierce, 56 was Buchanan, Democrats, and then Lincoln in 60. If James Garfield is on the exam, I don't know what I would do. I would throw a absolute fit in a good way, because that would be epic if Garfield was on the exam. Oftentimes, I'll tell you what, I mean, you'll see it for yourself tomorrow. They don't ask a lot of specific questions about presidential trivia. That's why I kind of stared away. I used to teach all this presidential trivia. I don't even think, have I shown off my hidden talent that I can name all the presidents in like 90 seconds in order? I don't think I've done that with you guys. I'll do that after the AP. But yeah, if Garfield was on there, it would most likely be about the Gilded Age because he was president in the Gilded Age. I don't know. Some people aren't impressed by the fact that I can do the presidents in order, so that's whatever. That's just they're missing out on a spectacular hidden talent. All right, these questions are great. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. We got a little less than 30 minutes now. Did I miss anything? I don't think. Let me scroll through. Did I miss anything? Forte gonna win? I don't think so. James would pick favorites. Oh, progressive era. Latch asked about the progressive era. I'm sorry. Progressive era, late 1800s. When you think progressive, think reform, think change. Same thing even in today's modern politics. Progressives are people that want to change, want to reform the government. So what was causing the desire to change? Well, in the post-Civil War era, the Gilded Age, robber barons, big business became so dominant in America that the little guy or the little girls in America were being sort of overlooked. And in the progressive era, there's so many different avenues to explore. So let's keep it streamlined. One, you get the sort of whatchamacallit. In the progressive era, you get the fight against big business. There were people that wanted to see big business slowed down. And arguably the president that most fought against big business is Theodore Roosevelt. Part of his square deal was an attack, a full frontal assault on big business. And so Congress together passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which meant that monopolies were banned in the United States. And ultimately, what starts to happen with big business is the government regulates big business on a greater level. So that's one important theme of the progressive era. Two, you get social activism. So the progressive era brought a lot of social activism to America. You get civil rights for Black Americans. You get civil rights for women, right? A lot of women's feminist movement starts in the progressive era. You get a big theme of the progressive era was immigrant rights. Lots of attention devoted to immigrants and improving the lives of immigrants. That's how you get like the whole house movement with Jane Addams. That's also where you start to get the beginning of charity amongst people in cities. And so as a result of that, lots of people begin to donate money, and inner city groups like the YMCA serve to give people aid. At the same time that lots of states lots of cities are, the federal government, we have no welfare programs at this time. So be in mind. Panganu, I don't know who that is. Welcome in though. If you're not from Bullis, welcome in. And you're right, James. I am your ape. I am him, right? I am him. Isn't that like a thing now, you guys? This person's probably like, why is this guy wearing a Blair Waldorf t-shirt? All right, so progressive era. You get civil rights, you get immigration. You also get the idea of the third great awakening, Latch. This is important. I know you're not in our class, but we talked about how in American history, right, first, second, third, fourth great awakening, progressive era starts to see a lot of Christian groups getting involved in social causes. So, like, for example, you get the Gospel of Wealth from Andrew Carnegie. Was a big part of the third great awakening. Groups like the YMCA, don't sleep on the YMCA on there. They came about as a result of Christian groups wanting to get more involved in improving people's lives. So that represents a change. What else am I missing here? Samantha Kotak. Progressive era. Temperance movement, part of the progressive era. The drive to ban alcohol would turn into the prohibition. The presentations on this. Oh my God. Oh my God. Populism. Don't forget about populism. So important, right? the Grange movement. So one thing about the progressive era um, is one thing about the progressive era is you get the rise of sort of grassroots movements. So a couple grassroots movements to talk about. One, the populism movement, aka the People's Party, farmers, the Grange movement. So a great progressive era reform is how so many of the um, sort of underdogs begin to become more politically active. Like farmers, for example, try to fight against how high grain, like shipping costs to ship grain and goods on railroads was really hurting the development of the agricultural industry. So farmers banded together, they formed cooperatives, and they actually start winning seats in state legislatures. And that's part of the Grange movement. Then you get the populism movement, which eventually was embraced by the Democratic Party, which was sort of became a party that appealed to the common person in America. These are all great examples of how the progressive era was so impactful in American history. And it spilled over into the early 1900s with other aspects like muckraking, right? Muckraking, a journalist taking on the role of exposing corruption, taking down big business, taking down urban political machines. You get the demise of Standard Oil. You also get new amendments to the Constitution passed in the progressive era, like the 19th Amendment for women, the Prohibition Amendment. So there's just so much going on in the progressive era. Time frame 1890s to early 1920s. That's like kind of the length of the progressive era. For those of you that are timeline oriented folks, by the way, this is a I found this on the internet. It's not my own. I think it's a great little timeline. All right, Latch, drive for 5, baby. I'll be in 102 around 7:20, 7:30. It's Michelle. Hello, it's Michelle. Welcome in. That's cool that popped up. You're welcome to ask and type in any questions. Um, these are mostly high school or AP students in the Washington, D.C. area. See the numbers growing a little bit. This is when I used to do these for AP World, man, back in the day. Jesus, I would get like 80 people. This is a small number, but that's all right. We got about 15 minutes or so, folks. About 15 minutes. So get them in while you can. Get them in while you can. Even those people who are watching that are not maybe AP US history students that are watching just because they're looking to get some US history fix for their plane rides or whatever they're doing out there in their cars. What are the native groups we need to know? Well, the relationship with Native Americans in U.S. history is certainly one that I think, you guys want me to predict essay questions. I'm not big on, nice Cobb. I'm not big on predicting essay questions. I don't want to give myself in trouble for predicting something that's not on the test. But here are themes about Native Americans that I think you need to be aware of. One, you got to know about the relationship before the arrival of the Europeans. You got to know about the relationship before the arrival of the Europeans with geography. Native groups adapted to their geography. That's kind of like how they formed the basis of their entire societies. So natives in the plains hunted buffalo, whereas natives in New England, instead, they fished and whaled and farmed, right? Southeast natives like the Cherokee, they wound up I'm going to sneeze, I think. Hang on. So sorry. Jesus. My bad. They God, that's probably going to get screenshot somewhere and replayed. Anyways, native groups. Thank you, James. So native groups adapting to geography. Then, of course, right, you get the Columbian Exchange and the spread of diseases and all that. Certainly, you guys know that narrative. Native groups get dragged into European conflicts like proxy wars, like the Beaver Wars, French and Indian War, even the Revolutionary War. Then, right, the more native groups get pushed to the interior of the Midwest, right, as the United States starts to expand after the Revolution, you get into direct conflict. And really, throughout the 1800s, that's the key. Like you can think about the conflict between the United States government and the natives is always present, right? It's omnipresent. The big change over time is that some native groups would fight back, others resisted in different ways, but eventually, after the Civil War, winning the West, right? And let's not forget, sorry, the Trail of Tears with the Southern tribes. But in terms of winning the war against Native Americans to spread west, the United States government would do an all-out drive to push natives onto reservations. The big treaty that for some reason always comes up on APUSH is the Treaty of Fort Laramie. That was an agreement between natives and the United States that paved the way for reservations. And by the end of the 1800s, right after Custer's last stand, groups like the Sioux, to James's question, which tribes? I would say Cherokee, the Sioux, the Iroquois. The Iroquois is going way back to like Revolutionary War time. But the Sioux were the group that really tried to the Sioux were really the group trying to resist the government more than any other group in the late 1800s. Let's not forget about the ghost dance movement. The ghost dance movement was a reaction to the reservations and the United States. The United States was one of those groups that government that really tried to crack down on tribal autonomy. So I think that for the natives, like you're most likely going to get a question that ends up with the late 19th century. Cool. People are starting to say some nice comments. Princess Colina, love it, love it. All right, I'm going to try to hit these. Like, oh, James, you're back. Jeruko, my guy. Like for all the Bullis kids that don't know anything about James from Basis DC, what an absolute legend. Good to see you, James. I hope the Comp Gov exam went well. Different doctrines related to. Okay, yeah, I'll do this real quick. So Monroe Doctrine: Europeans, stay the hell out of the Western Hemisphere. Don't come into our territory. Monroe Doctrine kind of defines America's foreign policy up until imperialism. During imperialism, America begins to shift its outlook on going abroad. And during imperialism, that's where you start to see Theodore Roosevelt adds to the Monroe Doctrine with what is called like the big stick policy. The big stick policy. Yeah, that's a good name for a foreign policy, I suppose. The big stick policy. And the big stick policy was basically for any country that was going to mess with the United States in the Western Hemisphere, they better be ready for the United States to protect its interests in Latin America. Remember, Roosevelt and the United States took over territories in Latin America, Puerto Rico. We had key trade with Cuba. And then, of course, there's the Panama Canal and there's the Banana Republics, where the U.S. Was sort of like pinning countries down and against their will sometimes, even if the countries accepted the United States being there. The United States was sort of pinning countries down and having its way with these countries. And Roosevelt was driving that with the big stick policy. And it benefited both sides to some degree. Then after the sort of big stick policy, during Franklin Roosevelt, now my students are going to feel probably like I screwed them over on this one. I didn't talk about this, but I'm going to bring it up now. During FDR's time, the United States developed what was called actually it was Taft, dollar diplomacy, put a lot of money into Latin America, and let's see where that goes. Then you had like what was called the good neighbor policy, which was America continuing to protect Latin America. So if you ever get a question on foreign policy, you've got to focus on how Latin America was the key to U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere. And then the other doctrine that comes up is the Truman Doctrine, which the Truman Doctrine was sort of a Cold War policy, contained communism. I don't know if I'm running out of doctrines, but I think that's about it. Market Revolution, unknown. Cool name. Unknown. Market Revolution, the growth of American industry, industrialization, canals, roads, industry, sectionalism, contributes to sectionalism, North versus South, different economic outlooks. So that's market revolution, free market, Henry Clay's American system. Those are all themes of the market revolution. It's a good cause of the Civil War in some respects because it definitely drives the fact that there's considerable sectionalism between North and South. Now we're starting to get a lot of people in, which is funny because I got 10 minutes left. Oh my goodness gracious. Kobe did drop 81. Asvidhi, I'm sorry, I do not make predictions. I told my students I don't want to like steer them wrong. So I don't have predictions on what the SAQ, LEQ, or DBQ is. I would just say that know the rubrics, study the scoring guidelines one last time. Oh yeah, Eisenhower doctrine was to use, you're right, Princess Colina will bow down to you at some point later as Princess of Apush Nation. Eisenhower was using like the CIA to enforce American policies abroad. Yeah, I just don't like making predictions on essays. It gets me in trouble every year because if it's not the one, I don't want to be like responsible for anyone like not studying something. Or it's Michelle. I'm confused for some reason about Manifest Destiny, World War I, and Great Depression. Oh boy. Okay, well I went over to depression. That's a lot to unpack. I'll do it in like as fast as possible. Manifest Destiny to drive to take the West, to conquer sea to sea, God-given right. It leads to America conquering the nation, right? Spreading its ideals all over. You can look at Manifest Destiny both as an internal and external policy. Internally, we wanted to conquer the West, and we did that by the end of the 19th century. Externally, we start getting involved in Latin America, Asia, with the Philippines, of course, what a dreadful nightmare that was, and also taking territories, trying to get into China during the Boxer Rebellion and the open door policy. So America saw itself as expanding its horizons eventually with our Navy and with our industrialization outside the U.S. So Manifest Destiny is arguably one of the most important developmental stages of American history because it leads to the United States trying to expand west, and it very much did so and achieved those goals. The World War I, the United States remained isolated out of World War I. We were not involved until 1917 when the Lusitania was sunk in 1915 and then the Zimmerman telegram. So lots of World War I questions come up about isolation, and that's a major theme with World War I, isolation. And then we get involved in the war. We're in there for a very short period of time. More important on World War I is how the government restricted civil liberties and civil rights. So people were jailed during the war, like Eugene Debs, for example, a famous labor union leader. But the government passed laws that made it illegal to speak out against the war. The draft was there. Not as unpopular as Vietnam or the Civil War draft, but the draft was there. And so, you don't have to know much about the battles, but also lots of questions on the League of Nations, really important. Woody Wilson in the League of Nations and how the Republicans blocked the League of Nations passage. And that's a major theme. And then, of course, like how World War I reflected segregation. I mean, what a shame, right? Black Americans fighting the war, and they come back and they're getting slaughtered in race riots. And it highlighted a lot of the disparities in American society that race relations would really spark after the war. One positive for World War I, women, right? Women benefited from World War I. They're in the factories. And as a result of that, major positive for women, right? They ended up getting the 19th Amendment after the war. It's ironic that live review ends at 9 when students start at 9. Oh, we're ending. Oh, you must be not in Amy Gore must not be in the DC area. A difference in Jeffersonian and Jackson era. Jeffersonian was the sort of like rise of the Democratic Republicans. Jefferson breaks away from the Federalist Party, forms his own party, and leads the United States into an era in which Dem reps will dominate American politics into the 1820s. You get so many straight, what is it, the number 7 straight Dem reps. Jefferson in 1800, Jefferson in 04, Madison in 08, Madison in 12, Monroe in 16, Monroe in 20. Oh, and then John Quincy Adams, 7. 7 straight Democratic Republican presidents. It's the greatest run for any party in American history. So ultimately, Jeffersonian, though, was about championing agrarian. Jefferson had an agrarian vision. He preferred agrarian over industrialization. But Jefferson was big on strengthening America abroad. Jefferson really wanted the United States to get involved in the French Revolution. Thankfully, he did not. He signed the Louisiana Purchase, though, so his alliance with France proved to be vital for that. And Jefferson also pushed America into one of its first international conflicts, so tough on protecting American interests. When American merchants were being attacked in North Africa along the Mediterranean Sea, Jefferson used the Navy. He was the first president ever to send American military forces into conflict after against a foreign nation, against a foreign country, after the Revolutionary War. So the Jeffersonian era also witnessed amazing growth in the beginning of westward expansion. Some of the earliest westward expansion were there. And so that would be a good point of the Jeffersonian era. Jackson era, kind of went over that earlier. Major points: more universal male suffrage. The new Democratic Party was formed under Jackson. Jackson's also guilty of trampling over the Constitution. And so that's a theme with Jackson. Jackson did increase the power of the presidency by threatening to invade South Carolina when the Tariff of Abomination. The 3 R's, interesting. Another teacher. 3 C's are change, overtime, and continuity. Compare and contrast, and then cause and effect. The 3 R's, though, I'm not sure. I like this. It's Michelle. Good vibes. It's Michelle. Not sure where you're from. Noel and Curto. There are 3 G's. Oh, relief, reform, recovery? Yeah. Okay, I didn't know what you were. The New Deal. Relief, reform, recovery. Yeah. Yeah, that's from the New Deal. FDR. The 3 C's, we talk about that in my class for like the skills, like the 3 C skills. James's iPhone. What in the heck? Somehow James Byrne, are you somehow hacking into my Apple Play? What the hell? Oh my God, this might be a sign. James, what are you doing? How the heck did that happen? I'm a little creeped out right now. And this is live too. You guys are seeing this thing live here. Someone might be hanging out at Barbers and Brews, maybe getting a haircut late at night. I don't know. I'm a little weirded out by this development here. How the heck did that happen? Oh my God. What tends to be most heavily emphasized topic on, I don't know, past exams? I don't know. I'm not sure. James from Basis DC. I couldn't tell you. That's me getting like too deep on this. Who's that behind me? Oh God. Can you imagine if like it's the ghost of the Gilded Age? Everyone wants to know the guess. No guess. No guess. I have no idea. The Ghost of the Gilded Age is the thing in our classroom because our like slideshow would always advance without me touching anything. I don't mean to be a punk. I have no idea what the DBQ and none. I grade AP World History essays. I have no idea. No idea. Okay. Sure. Boss Tweed. He was one of the leaders of the Democratic Party's urban machine in America. in the late 1800s during the Gilded Age. Tammany Hall was the name of the urban machine, and Boss Tweed bullied. And there's that famous cartoon of him standing over the ballot box, talking about like the ballot stuffing and completely corrupting the elections. But for many decades, Tammany Hall like dominated New York City politics. There's a good trend because I've taught AP American or U.S. government and AP comparative government. An important trend in American government is that cities tend to be more democratic. So you can kind of link that to Boss Tweed. All the main topics after 1950. All right, this is it because I've got a Zoom call with my father to go over the Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby cards. So I got to get off here in a minute, and my brain is fried. I need to switch gears from apush to horse racing. All right, 50s. You got Cold War. Cold War dominates. Yeah, Unit 10 is on the best sneakers of all time. Change over time in sneaker trends. All right, here we go. 50s, you got Cold War, dominates everything. Korean War going on in the 50s. Truman out, Eisenhower in. Eisenhower, interstate highway system, McCarthyism. It's nice of Princess Kalina live streams. I don't know what you live stream, but hopefully it's good content. Civil rights movement starts in the 1950s. Brown versus Board of Education, the Montgomery bus riots, not boycotts, excuse me. Little Rock Nine, Supreme Court cases, protecting civil rights, establishing those principles. Red Scare, McCarthyism. I'm not going in order. I'm just like literally, I'm literally just going off. Yeah, I'm going to rock my the New Balances came in, James. I haven't opened them yet, but they came in. So I might have to rock these tomorrow. They're pretty sick. Pretty sick. I might rock these. Or no, I might rock the Concords tomorrow. Whoops. Sorry, they just fell off the table. My bad. I might rock the Concords tomorrow. 60s, right? Now we're moving to the 60s. JFK, civil liberties, civil rights growth. Vietnam starts to come in. Space race. Eisenhower starts with the space race. Huge development in the 50s to 60s. But America getting more involved in Vietnam. 60s also sees the growth of the welfare state with the Great Society, especially after Kennedy's assassination. But Vietnam really cripples America's momentum in the 1960s. But at the same time, the protest movement, students, don't forget, you guys are like, you've seen this with the summer of 2020 in your lifetime, youth movements, 60s, they love asking questions. College Board loves asking questions in the 1960s about the youth movement. The youth movement in the 1960s is 100% something that you could argue is a major theme. Yeah, hippies, but also like Mario Salvo, the free speech movement, kind of combining intellectual development, counterculture movements. They love counterculture questions. They love talking about how there was this conflict between the baby boomers who nowadays, like you guys, remember a couple of years ago, the popular meme, okay, boomer. But at one time, that was the generation challenging the World War II generation, the greatest generation of traditional values. So 60s is definitely an era where youth movements are rising, and as in okay, what I'm looking at the chat here. Let's keep the chat clean because remember, this is all streamed. It stays on YouTube. So whatever you guys are saying on here, Cobb, could come back on you when you're applying to Eastern Nebraska Oceanic Institute of Research and Technology. You don't want them to rescind their scholarship offer for you to be their point guard. Yeah, so 60s counterculture is a huge theme. Also, 70s, the rise of conservatism. I'll end on this because I'm already over my time limit. Conservatism, the more I've studied the recent test, there's lots of questions about liberalism versus conservatism. That's really important in the sort of 20th century topics. So don't be alarmed or surprised to see questions. My recommendation for any of you that are going to stay up late, especially our West Coast viewers, review on the AP US history. Go to the AP US history. Um, go to the AP US history essays section, and in the process of doing that, look over the scoring guidelines. Like if you look at the past AP essays, they give you a lot of good recommendations, and you can look at those how they do that. Also, if you're struggling with a unit, practice some questions on AP Classroom, multiple choice. That really helps. I don't know what the last question was. What was the last question? So I'm kind of like all over the place, giving you a lot of things to think about. But no matter what, it's just a 3.5 hour test, and it'll all be over. And then you guys get the rest of your month or however much time you have left at school to sort of work on whatever your teachers do. So I'm sure you guys will be fine. So for my crew, we are for my crew, we got Pop-Tarts, 7:20. I'll be in the North Hall 102. All right. Maybe some other treats for you guys if you show up. So we'll be rocking and rolling. James, my man from Basis DC, always much respect. Always much respect. I appreciate all the support. Sorry I can't stay on. I gotta I'll call up my father. This princess person is legendary. I might have to follow. All right, with that, I'll end things I always do. Remember, the past shapes the future. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Drive for 5. Let's dominate this 8-push test tomorrow. See you, everybody. Take care.